plus many grand nieces and nephews. Our family thanks the University of Houston, and in particular, Professor Tom Lapin, for arranging this tribute to my sister. We miss her. I will simply say she's the only person I ever met that I think I could say she wished she had spent more time at the office.
And then I would like to bring up Eileen Maddocks.
Hello. Okay. Hello, everybody. And again, thank you for the university, Dr. Lapin, arranging this very special occasion. For 83 years, I had an older sister. Now I no longer have an older sister, at least in this life. It feels surreal. And in addition to the pain, there's a void. And I suspect that void will always be with me and with the family. She was the oldest, as we know, and the psychologists say that it's the oldest girl who's responsible, who's the role setter, who is dutiful, and all those good things, which left me, the middle one, to be the rebel. And for better or for worse, I was. I got the most out of that. Thinking about Rosalie, I thought about our childhood. And there was one summer when I was 7 or 8 years old where we four at that time went to visit our aunt and her 3 children who were our ages, more or less, all integrated together. And on one rainy afternoon, the cousins brought out their large collection of comic books, and we went at it. What did Rosalie do? She found the National Geographics. And that's how she spent the afternoon. One day, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, I don't know, I missed the bus to school. And so Rosalie said, well, go to school with her. Okay, she was in junior high, which now is called middle school. And so I spent the day with her. And imagine, the students all changed classrooms and walked down the halls every hour or so. Wow, what a day I had. Okay, something to look forward to. And also as a teenager, I was very caught up in my life. I couldn't imagine a life beyond high school, but I knew, well, someday it's coming. And I was afraid of college. And so I asked her, what is college like? I'm so scared about even thinking about it. And she explained and soothed my anxiety, and I went to college, and all was well from there on. I'm in awe of what she accomplished in her professional life. The number of her published research articles are almost beyond counting. I'm in awe that she spent 60 years in her academic profession here. The The void is not forever. One day we will meet again. As a person of faith, I believe that we as souls pass on. She's no longer going to be a paleogeologist in the next world. I will no longer be a writer or a historian in the next world. Maybe something like that, but who knows? I don't know what it's like over there. But I do know that Rosalie and I will have a new meeting of the minds, and we'll go off on adventures together. And while we're still here on earth, it's so important to remember we only get one birth family here on earth. And we have all probably had rocky roads with various members of our birth families. But as we get older, those roads can be paved over smoothly, and we end up the best of friends. And now from the youngest sister, Geraldine, whom we call Jerry. She was 7 years younger than Rosalie. Her relationship with her was very different from mine, and she really didn't get to know her until adulthood. But she remembers that Rosalie taught her how to drive. That was a big one. And then she helped Jerry to buy her first car. Jerry remembers how wonderful it was to get to know the real Rosalie as she got older and older. Rosalie had a very gentle heart, covered by a more rough, businesslike exterior. You reach that heart, and you found Rosalie, a very loving heart.
I would like to bring up Rebecca Maddocks, the niece.
I'm sorry, I didn't know there was a time limit, so I'll try to talk fast. Thank you. I hope that I am able to honor and speak for all of the nieces and nephews who loved her by telling a few memories of Auntie Rosalie and sharing how she impacted my own life. Memories of Auntie Rosalie. When I think of Auntie Rosalie, I think of pugs, pools, and books. Sometime after Christmas Day, most years, Auntie Rosalie would drive from her house in Montrose to our home on Dearborn Street to exchange presents, as tradition. The December air would be unseasonably hot and damp. Through the front window, I would see her car pull up in the driveway, and then moments later, there she was, entering the living room where we all sat gathered like magpies, chattering loudly. All of us, 8, the Harold Maddocks family. Auntie Rosalie would look you directly in the eyes, grasp your arms, say your name as if it was a complete sentence. Rebecca. And then she'd say, "It's nice to see you." Emphasis on the nice, and a warm hug would follow. From her car, she carried in a plastic milk crate or 2 or 5, full of rectangular parcels, some fat, some slim, each individually wrapped, color-coded in a specific Christmas paper, sorted in groups. Then she would unpack, carefully sorting and dividing the contents of said crates into tall groups like colorfully wrapped stacks of pancakes, some 13 or 14 layers high. I remember as a small child watching her unload the stacks and staring intently at the shape and the size of the parcels as she placed them atop one another. And I also remember evaluating the situation with growing alarm. While math was not my gift, I mentally calculated the volume of a rectangular prism and concluded that there was a 0% chance that anything wrapped in my stack was going to turn out to be a holiday Barbie. And I was correct. What Auntie Rosalie brought were toys. Not toys, but books. It was always books. With Auntie Rosalie, her love language was literature. Books were cherished possessions, and knowledge and curiosity were important qualities to her. And thus, that's what we received from her each holiday. The gift of knowledge by way of books. Not the gift of a Barbie with a great wardrobe and removable high heels, which is what I wanted. With the reality of this sinking in quickly in hindsight, I'm sure my face betrayed my inner emotions when Auntie Rosalie handed me the first of many flat parcels to unwrap from my mystery stack. I think I opened it a little too quickly, gave it a cursory glance without too much thanks, set it to the side, and treated the remaining items similarly because they were not what I had really wished for. For being less than excited to receive what she was so excited to give me in that moment, I am sorry for that, even now, retelling that memory. But if Auntie Rosalie noticed my childish reaction, she never said so. Auntie Rosalie was stoic, serious and steady. She was calm, soft-spoken, and she had a hearty laugh. And she was always very gracious, as she was that day, dignified, polite and reserved, even when gifting books to an unappreciative young niece who needed a gratitude and an attitude adjustment. As I mentioned, Auntie Rosalie loved books. Every room in her home had custom bookcases built that spanned floor to ceiling, and she read, collected, and gifted hundreds of books a year. Others knew her as an academic researcher and educator, but I knew her only as my huggable Auntie Rosalie, who had a great backyard pool, who loved wheezy, snorty, asthmatic pugs, and above all, I knew Auntie Rosalie loved books. My Auntie Rosalie loved reading, gifting, and sharing books. She would always first read each and every Christmas book before gifting, and she would shop secondhand stores and library sales throughout the year to curate, compile, and select her favorites. She gave us things she personally loved, what she thought we might enjoy based on our current interests, mysteries, thrillers, classic literature, nothing was off limits. In her familiar looping cursive, she would inscribe the inside of each and every book she gave with our name, to Rebecca, from Auntie Rosalie, and she would note the year. Some books were small, like the Beatrix Potter books, slip-covered and full of beautiful watercolor illustrations of animals from the British countryside that I'd never heard of, like voles. Some books were big, and the characters easily recognizable, like the fantastically colorful Wizard of Oz or Mary Poppins. And she would also gift lesser-known books in the same series, like Ozma of Oz and Mary Poppins Returns. Some books came in chronological sets, like the Chronicles of Narnia or The Lord of the Rings, and were full of fantasy and battles. Some were full of princesses and fables from all over the world, like the Andrew Lang colored fairy books and the Brothers Grimm. Many were vintage books, raw paper edges, jagged and uneven, yellowing and spotted pages, spines of fraying cloth with faded and faint titles, dating from the early and mid-1900s, full of vocabulary words that I had never heard of, like velocipede. While my excitement at receiving books in those early holiday years may not have been overwhelming, something incredible actually happened as a result of the annual book giving that I am eternally grateful to my Auntie Rosalie for. I learned to love books, and I especially learned to love reading. Despite my initial disinterest, it wasn't long before the books my Auntie Rosalie gifted me started finding their way into my everyday. Hitchhiking, one by one, into my needlepoint Sunday school bag to be read in a church pew or stashed under my bed pillow. Some went into my school backpack or ended up in summer camp and overnight duffels. Several rode shotgun beside me on road trips and flights, traveling with me everywhere I went. Once I started reading what Rosalie had given me, I didn't stop. From then, I consumed books voraciously, and they became tremendous sources of knowledge and fed my curiosity and creativity. They improved my vocabulary and educated me, and I truly looked forward to the towering stack of identically wrapped gifts with complete sincerity ever after. I don't believe I would have known so much without Auntie Rosalie's books. I know this holds true for many of my siblings and cousins. The Barbies that I had so desperately wanted that Christmas, I received them on another holiday, and they were played with for a short time, but ended up tossed under my bed, shoved into a box in a closet a few years later. In comparison, many of the books that Auntie Rosalie gifted me came with me to college, held pride of place on shelves in my first, second, and third home, and most recently they traveled overseas with me and back. I still have the majority of books Auntie Rosalie gifted me, and they are cherished mementos of how she shared something she loved with those she loved. Because of Auntie Rosalie's thoughtfulness, the love of reading I developed impacted not only my own life, but also the lives of my children, who benefited from my reading to them and from sharing books from my collection. All three of my children were early and frequent readers, same with my nieces and nephews. I'm grateful for the lifelong gift of literature my Auntie Rosalie gave me, and I know others feel the same. Besides Christmas book exchanges, on hot Houston summer holidays, when U.S. flags were proudly flying, fireworks were popping, and temperatures were rising into the red and beyond, Auntie Rosalie would invite us over for a swim. If you may imagine, we were 6 children, ranging in age from teen to toddler, accustomed only to swimming in our own above-ground backyard pool, which was about 4 feet of water, shallow enough that you could walk across it edge to edge in a matter of seconds and stay half dry. And then we were invited to swim in our Auntie Rosalie's beautiful crystal blue, very wide and very deep backyard underground pool. None of us really knew how to swim, but that did not stop us. Of course we said yes. My parents would load me and my 5 siblings into our Pelgreen Ford Econoline van, throw in some snacks, a million towels, and begin the journey from Spring Branch to Montrose. In my mind, it always felt like a major road trip across the nation. In reality, it took about 25 minutes. When we pulled up at the curb in front of Auntie Rosalie's yellow Montrose bungalow, feeling like we had just driven coast to coast, we would tumble out the side door like ants, spilling out of a disturbed anthill, never arriving quietly. I'm sure it must have felt like a home invasion of sorts to Auntie Rosalie, who was peacefully living alone with only her beloved pugs, Hector and Phoebe. If there had been a decibel meter on her porch, it might have changed her mind about extending the invitation again, and maybe she would have wisely pretended not to be home. But loud as we were, she always welcomed us in. As excited as we were at the idea of swimming, the reality was we were a bunch of water chickens. It must have been equal parts entertaining and alarming for Auntie Rosalie to watch us. Sometimes we would dip one toe in the water and then the other, declare the water too cold to swim, despite the outside temp being over 100, then sit down and spend the remainder of our visit never leaving the pool entrance step. Or if we dared get off the step and actually got into the water, we were not brave enough to do much of anything but hold fast to the curved concrete rim of her pool wall and inch our way around the perimeter one arm span at a time, holding on by fingertips. One of the worst things that could happen was if the sun hid behind a cloud, the theme music to Jaws was then involuntarily cued in our minds, which meant all toes had to immediately exit the pool by the fastest method possible, or else risk loss of limb by way of starving shark. Worse still, if this occurred when we happened to be inching our way around the edge, that then required that we propel both legs sideways, up out of the water onto the wall where we would hold on to the rim for dear life. Auntie Rosalie watched us navigate her pool this way with a look of reserved bemusement and with the patience of a saint. I'm sure she thought we were certifiably insane, or maybe, probably just thought we should all take some swimming lessons. But whatever she thought, she always stayed politely quiet. I'm sure it thrilled Auntie Rosalie no end when we used our best efforts to avoid being eaten alive in the pool by anything. If someone went underwater, he or she always managed to come up for air in the exact location where her pool cleaner was. This means Auntie Rosalie looked over on more than one occasion to find a child entangled in the flexible white tubing that connected her pool pump. I'm sure this just thrilled her no end. Still, she invited us back. Despite all of our antics, Auntie Rosalie patiently welcomed us time and time again, warmly, and hospitably hosted us, and I only ever recall her making a moderately exasperated face a few times. She was very kind. We were so fortunate to have had many fun Memorial Day, Labor Day, and July 4th swims at her home over the years, along with many Christmas holiday visits there too. When I was on a break from college, sometime around 19 or 20 years ago, I was living in Brenham, Texas, and short on cash. My mom, I believe, told Auntie Rosalie that I was seeking a way to earn money, something just mentioned in a casual phone conversation, and thus Auntie Rosalie contacted me and offered to pay me to come paint the interior of her home, including ceilings. My painting experience at the time was nil, but I was young and broke, blindly confident, and I gratefully agreed to do it. I remember making that 83-mile drive back and forth, on and off, for many days while I painted for Auntie Rosalie, thinking I was quite the professional painter. She paid what, at the time, was a high hourly rate, more than I had ever earned before. It was hard, hot work. The house did not have central air. I was on a ladder for hours at a time, sweating, arms aching, but I genuinely enjoyed the project. Midway through, we would eat together. Auntie Rosalie would talk a little bit about her childhood or her students. I caught her up on my life and then back to work. At the end of the day, I would clean up and go home. I thought I nailed it, evidenced by the fact that Auntie Rosalie paid me so generously for this effort. Many years later, as an adult, after having owned homes, and after having painted more rooms since, I was again in Auntie Rosalie's home and looked around with fresh eyes, and I glanced at my painting handiwork. I must say, in all honesty, I was a truly terrible painter, and I don't know why she paid me except love. Perhaps she was too polite to not, or perhaps she was just seeking a way to give me a small bit of help and support under the guise of me helping her. Only she knows, but I am grateful for those summer days spent sharing a little extra time with her one-on-one. Auntie Rosalie was independent, educated, inquisitive, compassionate, and kind. She was devoted to her job, devoted to her studies, to her fellow faculty members, to her students, and ridiculously smart. She was a highly respected academic mind and researcher. She traveled the world, shared her gifts graciously, loved learning, gave generously, and most of all, she never stopped reading and never stopped encouraging others to read. She cared about her neighbors, loved her pets, loved her family, her siblings, her nieces and nephews, her friends, and even served as a big sister mama to her youngest sibling. She was one of a kind. In the last text message I received from my Auntie Rosalie not very long ago, she was unwell, and I was offering to bring her a meal, not paint. She thanked me, but declined because, she said, she had already been ministered to that day. A neighbor had come by, and she emphasized, we mustn't be greedy. I think that phrase perfectly describes something beautiful about how my Auntie Rosalie navigated her life. She lived a truly remarkable and yet a wholly unremarkable life at the same time. For all of her achievements professionally, she lived simply, shared what she had with others, and never took more than she needed. She was modest and restrained, owning minimal possessions and purchases beyond books and sentimental knickknacks. I never once heard her brag about herself, and in large part, I had absolutely no idea what she even did or the scope of her accomplishments and research until I was well into my adult years. To me, she was just Auntie Rosalie who loved pugs, pools, and books, and us. Auntie Rosalie lived humbly, left a small footprint, put others before herself, and certainly was not greedy. I think Auntie Rosalie would be so honored to know that her lifetime of commitment to education will continue to bless others who love reading just as much as she did. Thank you, University of Houston, for the endowment created to honor her name, which will continue to grow the love of reading for another generation of students and scholars. My siblings, cousins, and I, my entire family, we are so lucky to have had the time and memories that we shared with Auntie Rosalie, and we will miss her very much. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to invite Rosalie's friends and colleagues to say a few words. Dr. Lapin.
Thank you, Summer. Got it. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, the family, for the stories, and that really added more depth to my understanding of Rosalie and her life, so I really appreciate that, because, as you say, she was quite a private person, and but hearing those stories really, added a lot more color. And I would say that, gratitude and grief is how I feel about this situation. And the gratitude is that Rosalie, as we all have heard and know from experience, did nothing subpar. Everything she touched was exceptional. Whether it was doing basic work in the background for the department with scheduling, or her research, or interacting with family and friends, it was all at the highest level. And what I admire about her and my interaction with her, so I've been at the University of Houston for about 21 years, which is a fraction of how long she's served at the university. And I admired her steadfastness, her demand for excellence on all levels, even to her colleagues, and especially students. But I also admired that she wasn't dogmatic. She grew with the changes in the university. And I can give one example of that kind of resilience and accommodation is I just started work as department chair, and then COVID hit. And she is in charge of scheduling, and she and I worked together to navigate these totally uncharted times of how are we going to actually implement an educational program when it is going to be online with no classrooms, and just navigating all of that. And it was seamless. It was almost like she just understood what needed to be done. And we would talk, and the pieces were in place. It was remarkable working with her, and her foresight, her engagement, attention to detail on all levels, and including with people. I think, my experience, she was quick to laughter and to smile in some of our discussions, and also quick to see something, then I can just picture in her face like a new piece of information that might change how things might be done. And she would like an epiphany. And then it would just happen. So her intellect and her presence and, friendship was remarkable. And I look up to her every day, and I try to live up to her expectations, for lack of a better term, because her expectations were extremely high. And so I have in my mind, her voice or her look, that look right there, to keep me honest, right? So her legacy with students and with colleagues and with this institution is going to, continue on and hopefully grow as we reflect on her impact and contributions, not just to the science, but to the community of the University of Houston, in particular with the students and faculty and colleagues and staff. And so with that, I just want to show how grateful we are to have had that time together to learn and to see an exemplar of how to be, right? So thank you all for coming. And we'll have Don Van Nieuwenhuis come give a few words. You got it, buddy.
Well, it's good to see her family, another side of Rosalie I didn't see. I heard a lot about you. Whenever there was a Christmas or a Thanksgiving, you may not believe this, but she was very anxious about making sure everything was going to be perfect. And she just, she didn't know whether it was good to have people there because she had to do so much work. But from what I understand, everything turned out really well. And I suppose the thing that I should focus on is the fact that I'm kind of a unique survivor of Rosalie. I started out, I met her in 1973. I was a graduate student. I was looking for a challenge. I was looking for classes that really wanted you to do something and really study. And boy, did she give it to me. I mean, the first thing I thought about from a positive side was that I got more out of that class and then the next class and the third class after that than any other classes I've ever been in. I mean, she really had to make sure that we learned everything she knew, and we all knew that she had 4 students, 4 good students. We couldn't even make a class now, but we had 4 good students that really just loved everything she was trying to teach us. And it was really an amazing, amazing thing. But as I was listening to everybody, someone was talking about the books, and of course I knew about her love for books from day one. And as it turns out, as a graduate student, I didn't have a whole lot of money. And one semester, we had a course. It was in ostracods, Micropaleontology 2 it was called. And most of the professors would make sure they had a good thick tome of a book to teach you through. And so if you ever had a course with 2 books, you think, that's a pretty good course. And then, I don't think I ever had a course where I had 3 books. And still, that's even better. But in this class, we had 4 books. And one of the books was a book by a fellow named Ernst Mayr that no one's probably ever heard of, but he was a really famous ecologist and taxonomist. Taxonomy is the science of boredom. It's where you figure out a really rigorous way of identifying everything down to the finest scale, all the way from phyla down to species. And fortunately, she taught me subspecies weren't worth having. And that's something I learned. But so we didn't divide and pass it. But anyway, to make a long story short, Ernst Mayr's book, as good as it is, was very boring, very hard to read. And as I was growing up, I came from a big family. And I remember even in high school, when I studied, I had to study on the school bus where all the kids were screaming because it was quieter than my house. I had 4 brothers. And getting to my 4 brothers, I've lost 3 already, and the 3rd one I lost on February 22nd. So I wished I could have spent more time seeing Rosalie, but I was busy trying to get retired so I could spend more time with him, and I wasn't able to do that. But that's about me, not Rosalie. So anyway, I started out as a student. I couldn't get enough of what she was trying to teach me. And so as it turns out, I ended up going back to the University of South Carolina for my PhD. One of the professors knew an LSU graduate that was in charge of paleo and stratigraphy at the USGS. And because of what I learned from Rosalie, I was able to work in the Smithsonian Institution just like she did. And I got to go up there anytime there was a holiday. And make another long story short, I was actually completing the thesis for my master's while I was working on my PhD because the University of South Carolina also had funding for me to finish my thesis. And so that's what I did. And so anyway, as time went along, I finally got a job with an oil company. As it turns out, I worked at Mobil Oil Company. Then I went to the Amico Research Center. In both places, I was really good at finding oil, whether I was doing biostratigraphy or not, whether I was using ostracods in Azerbaijan to figure out where we had to stop drilling a well and save $8 million or not. It's because of Rosalie Maddocks got me interested in those little critters we call little fleas, ocean fleas or marine fleas. Excuse me? Well, they are ostracods, but we call them water fleas. People would call them water fleas, and there's even a group of them called seed. What do they call them? It's not seed. My memory's gone, but anyway, I never did like common names for anything. You know, we always had to have a species and genus. But anyway, so with what I learned from her, I did really well. And as things progressed, I was at Amico at the Research Center when she had a symposium here on campus. And we went all over Texas and whatnot. And we looked at a lot of the outcrops. And somebody mentioned that she would stop at outcrops. When I was a graduate student here with her, every other weekend we were in the field. We sampled almost every outcrop in the state of Texas. She has tomes of things that are now gone, but tomes of field guides, and we went to almost all the locations throughout the state of Texas. And after I graduated, I found out that she had all the other students going to all the outcrops that we missed. But at one point in time, when we were in the field, one of the fine students that was in our classes, Billy Fred Long, had a great Texas name, and he was very proud of that name. I used to just call him Billy, and he said, "No, I'm Billy Fred." And so I said, "Sorry." But anyway, one day we were in the field, and we were on an outcrop. We were about 50 feet in the air, and depending on what was going on, I'd hold the bag like this and hold it open. It was holding with one hand, and we're like this on a little ledge, trying not to fall. And he hit the rock hammer in one direction, and I would catch it in the bag. Then we'd switch the rock hammer in the bag, and I would hammer it from the other side. And when we got back down there, she said, "You didn't get enough." And we're going, "There's no way I'm going back up there." And other things that happened was everybody talks about how sweet she is, and she was a very sweet person. And it took me a long time to get past that armor that she had. Okay, it took a long time. In fact, it wasn't until 2002. Remember, I met her in 1973. It wasn't until 2002, when I started working at the University of Houston, that I finally felt comfortable enough to call her Rosalie. And it took a long time to get there. And, but so I survived as a graduate student. Then I was kind of an interested party through my job that I had. I even gave her a couple of grants. And I think it's important to point out, I gave her 2 grants, and they were to help publish things for Ostracon and for, there was also a newsletter that went out that was called Cyprus. And Amico helped produce that for many years. But anyway, I gave her, I don't want to say how much money it was because it's worth a lot more than it is now. But I gave her a certain amount of money, and 10 years later when I started working there, she had all but about 10 cents of it still left. She hadn't spent a penny of it. And that's just the kind of person she was. She was, I wouldn't say frugal to a fault, but she was responsible. She was very responsible about everything. And you know, she really had what you would call a capacious mind, and it really got a lot out of the relationship. But again, I started as a student. I kind of worked as somebody in industry that was getting help from her in how to use ostracods to do biostratigraphy well, how to do ostracods, use ostracods to do paleogeography, and along with some of the things I learned at the Smithsonian on my own, you know, I was able to do a lot of different things. And then I became her colleague at the University of Houston and found out that very much like my father, if she said something, you better be listening. And one of the saddest things that I had to see was the fact that she was very disappointed, I hate to say, in a good number of her students. She always had a few really good students, but some of them barely showed up, I think, to classes. And it's kind of like right now, I'm sitting here thinking about it. It really bothers me that all the professors are sitting in the back of the room. You know, normally, if a student is good, they're going to be right there on the rails, hanging over that booth right there, and just trying like heck to learn as much as they can. Because if there's anybody that was a student of hers, they know as well as I do, because you're here. But if there's a student in here, you know, that woman could teach you anything and everything, and she taught life lessons. She taught incredible life lessons. And the one of the most important ones, I made a list on a thing that I wrote up, and I'm not going to read it, but that self-reliance that she had. You know, you could throw her out in a field somewhere, and she'd figure out how to work on ostracods. And you know, she'd make a microscope out of scratch or something. But you know, that's the kind of person she was. And that self-reliance is what really helped me do well when I worked in industry. So then I became a colleague, but not too long after I became a colleague, maybe 2 or 3 years, we started to become really good friends. And I think one of the great blessings in my life is that woman right there. That woman right there meant so much to me, and there's no way I can measure what she did for me in my life. And you know, some people got to see her every now and then. Every day almost I got to walk by her office, and I was crazy like her. I always thought I didn't work enough. And but after a while, you know, after about 20 years, COVID kind of did me in. After COVID, I became kind of more relaxed, and I was happy to see even Rosalie became more relaxed. You may not notice that, but she did. And it was really good, but not that long ago, and I'm sorry to say that it may never get finished, but she was working true to her character. She didn't work on the ostracods that had lots of ornamentation on their shells, things that were easy to discriminate from one species to the next. She worked with the ones that looked like jelly beans. Smooth on the outside, smooth on the inside, You had to really look at the muscle scars. You had to really pay attention to all the very minute features that were preserved, not only in the shell, but also in the body of these water fleas that and I worked for the oil industry, and they called them water fleas all the time. Kind of irritated me, but I've almost forgotten that term. But she looked at all of that in such incredible detail, and that was because it challenged her. She didn't want to work on something that was easy, and she could have worked in any part of the geological column. Most people can't do that when it comes to paleontology because there's just too many species. She could have done whatever she wanted to do, and she focused on the hardest group of ostracods she could find because she knew nobody else could do it. And she automatically became the expert. And with that, again, thank you, Rosalie, for everything you have done for me in my life. And it's kind of like the Mona Lisa stare there. No matter where you are in this room, she's looking at you. But thank you for letting me have a chance to share my evolving relationship with Rosalie Maddocks, from student to colleague and to friend, and I really will cherish for the rest of my life the friendship. And I'm really sorry I didn't get to see her more, but when I was in the hospital where she was staying, I held her hand tightly and she held mine tightly. And she looked at me and she said, "Don, we waited too late, didn't we?" And I said, "Yes, Rosalie." And she said, "You really knew that we worked too long, didn't we?" And I said, "Yes, I knew." And those are the last words I heard from her. So thank you very much for listening to me.
And I would like to bring up Dr. Peter Copeland.
I just finished my 36th year at the University of Houston, which of course means when I showed up on the first day, Rosalie had been here for 23 years. But I want to take our interactions back a little further than that, because I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. I grew up across the street from, I had no idea, the famous paleontologist Raymond C. Moore, who was a very big deal at KU and around the world as a paleontologist. The kids on the block just thought he was Mr. Moore and kind of not very fun. But I like to think that Rosalie might have walked past my house on the way to visit Dr. Moore, or somehow that we passed by. I mean, she left Lawrence when I was just beginning to go to grade school. But a few years later, I became an undergraduate in geology at KU. And I met my wife there, and she was also taking a class in paleontology, and she remembers the paleontology professor who had been a student with Rosalie at KU. And he spoke to the class in a way that you could get away with speaking in 1979, saying that he wasn't quite sure if women had a place in paleontology. And that's the world that we lived in, and that's the world Rosalie made her way through. And that's something we always remember about Rosalie. As I was thinking of other things to say, I was trying to think of a certain thing to bring up, and something Rebecca said really hit me, and it really helps me now, is that when she talked about how she could say your name like it was a complete sentence. I like it for people to figure out that I prefer to be called Pete rather than Peter, but I never, ever wanted to make that exception for Rosalie because she had that way of just saying Peter. And I never wanted anything else because that was genuine. You just felt like that was exactly who she was. And that was easy to take. No matter what she was doing, you never felt like there was anything else going on. And I think that's why so many of our students have appreciated her over the years. As a geology professor, we get to see our students in ways that lots of other professors don't, because we have field trips, and students sit at the end of the day and they talk about things, and they talk about ways that they don't get to chance, unguarded moments that I don't guess, a lot of professors get. And, people talk about this and that, and they'll talk about Dr. Maddocks. And they would often talk about how difficult her class was, but while they were doing that, you knew that it was a pain, it was trouble, but it was because she had these standards, and that's who exactly she was. And so I've only learned recently that there's something that psychologists and education people call type 2 fun. It's not something you enjoy in the moment, but you later come to appreciate it. And I think a lot of our students will now understand that they had a lot of type 2 fun in Rosalie's presence. And so just one other thing Rebecca said that caught my mind. You mentioned small footprint. And I think one of the wonderful things about working at a university is you get to be over and over again exposed to new people. And that means that your footprint is mini. And I think whether or not, and so I think events like this are about ripples that go out from individuals. And whether the ripple began with someone named Rosalie, or Auntie Rosalie, or Dr. Maddocks, those ripples will go out. And Rosalie is mourned and missed, but those ripples will keep going, and she will be remembered.
And Dr. Julia Wellner.
Thank you, Summer. And thank you to the family for sharing so many stories so that we got to learn a little bit more. I've been here almost 20 years, but I still remember the first time I ever spoke with Rosalie very clearly, in part because she yelled at me. And maybe raised her voice, and I was standing on a chair and in the hallway of our office building, and I was standing on a chair, and I don't think she thought I was stealing anything. She knew who I was, and I don't think she thought I was falling. I was on a stable chair, but she thought it was improper to stand on chairs. And she was angry that I was maybe, getting my dirty shoes on the seat of a chair, and that I was being hasty and should have taken the time to have a step stool. And she's right. I should have had a step stool instead of standing on that office chair. And I think that stands out in my memory, not only because it was a scary first encounter, but because she reminded me to do things properly. And that is, to me, one of her most impactful lessons, is to go slowly and do it correctly. At least in recent years, Rosalie has not had any graduate students. She's been here as a researcher and teaching undergraduate students, but in recent years, she has had no graduate students of her own. I want to highlight, though, that she was still teaching our graduate students in other ways. Some of my students are here right now, actually one student and one alumni, and they were Rosalie's TAs. And through her work with graduate students that were helping her in her undergraduate labs, I think she continued to educate our students in a variety of other ways. Some of my students do work on microfossils, not ostracods, other fossils, but the lessons that she shared were like the ones she shared with me, to do it properly the first time. But also, she taught them how to speak to a room. She taught them how to engage with material, how to read material properly. And I think that her lessons came through to us in a huge number of ways, far beyond micropaleontology. A few years ago, maybe about 8 years ago, I arranged a surprise birthday cake in a faculty meeting for Rosalie's 80th birthday. The faculty that are here might remember that cake. It was a surprise. We all had a slice of cake in the faculty meeting and then moved on. I'm pretty sure she liked it. I'm not certain that she liked being surprised. I hope she liked it. About a year ago, when I was working to start the endowment in her honor, many of us wanted to do that for her, and it was just over a year ago that I started that process. It took longer than I thought it would. I definitely asked her permission then, right? The cake was one thing, but the endowment, I had her permission to do what we were doing. And we wanted to honor Rosalie's legacy in this department for the long-term future. And I met with her in her office, surrounded by so many books, we could barely move in there. And she gave her permission to start that endowment. But she said, well, we could use her name. There would be no discussion of gender. There would be no discussion of micropaleontology or paleontology at all. And her picture was not to be used in the advertising. And the reason was it was because it was for our department's future. It was not for her. It was about the department growing for future students and future researchers. And so I'd just like to end on remembering that part of her, that even when we wanted to do something to honor her, she made it about us and our future years here. And I think that's an extraordinary gift from her. Thank you.
Well, thank you for everyone who's taking their time to step up and share memorable stories of Dr. Maddocks. I called her Dr. Maddocks. I'm actually a program director, graduate advising, so there was times I'll just share that I would ask her for some assistance for course scheduling, and I remember she was like, you can come to my office. And I remember sitting in her office and seeing those books and seeing all the samples that she had. And I remember just sitting there and I could see the passion that she had for just doing that part of course scheduling. And she had a system. It was down to the T, and I remember taking notes. But I cherished that moment. And I remember a couple of times, because I park, it's called the F lot. So she would park outside of the parking garage, which is a good walk. And I would always see her. First thing in the morning, I would come 7:30, and she's just walking. And I would look at them like, she is determined. She loves coming to work that early in the morning. But I would always see that in the morning, she'll just trek along. But I cherish the memories that I had in my short term here, 4 years with the department, and being able to have that little moment together with her in her office and just in her space. And so I appreciate that moment with Dr. Maddocks. But also I just want to share that the family would also thank everyone for the love and support, calls, messages, and acts of kindness shown during this time. While today marks a difficult goodbye, it is also a reminder of a life that touched so many people in meaningful ways. May we carry forward the lessons, love, laughter, memories shared with Dr. Maddocks. On behalf of the family, thank you again for joining us, for support, and for helping celebrate a beautiful life. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Summer, and thank you, everyone. So we have some bites to eat upstairs, and would you like? Please.
Hi, I'm Alex. I was the baby of the family. Rosalie was working on her master's when I was born. In every practical, meaningful way, she was my mother. I do want to have briefly leave two memories that I thought people would like to remember her by. Her first job after getting her doctorate was at the Smithsonian Institute. And I was living with her in Washington. And I remember growing up in the basement of the Smithsonian Institute at about the age of 5, surrounded by half of the fossils of the known world, and just the wonder of it. And then in '67, we came to Houston. And so I can say that I basically spent my summers and grew up in the paleo lab next door to her office. I think I was about 8, summer vacation. You're not doing anything useful, you're just playing outside. Come into the office with me. Sure, okay, fine. And what do I do? Well, here's a book. Oh, here's another book too. And so I'm sitting there reading the textbooks for paleontology. You know, I was about 8. Didn't understand one word in 10, but it was interesting. And then I made the mistake of going, a few hours later, like maybe 5 or 6, that, I'm bored. Oh, well, let's do something then. And so she introduces me to the stereoscope and gives me a tray of microfossils. Okay, put the ostracods in this one, pick them out with a paintbrush, and then put the forams in this one over here. This is at about 8 years old. I can't count the number of days and summers I spent there doing that. Yeah. But I loved it. And then, in later years, I started joining the department field trips out into Central Texas, weekends, San Saba, Brownswood, collecting. And of course, I was popular with all the undergrads because being a kid, I could get to the top of those 40-foot cliffs because everything down in the lower levels was all pretty well picked out unless you dig it out. So I could have like a rock hammer in my teeth and up the side of a cliff. And I remember up at the very top, almost sheer vertical, like outside of Brownswood, found a slab. That was back in the old days when the Carboniferous was still split between Mississippian and Pennsylvanian. And this was like an early Pennsylvanian outcrop. And it had trilobites on it, which you almost never find. You couldn't find them in the lower levels, but up there at the very top of the formation, there they were. And it was like, and people going, "You found what?" And so then I was like bringing down slabs for everybody else so they could get theirs. Then the other memory I wanted to leave with her is, I don't think it's ever been discussed, and it isn't in her history, but the summer of 1980 we spent in Central Texas helping Alvarez work on the dinosaur extinction at the Cretaceous-Tertiary boundary, of which there's a very small exposure out in Central Texas. And we spent a weekend sampling the whole thing in like 1/4-inch little things. And it was like only a couple feet above the creek bed, but we didn't know where the boundary was, so we had to start at the top and we worked our way down. And Rosalie got a credit from the Alvarez when his theory was completed. I still have that Science magazine article where it was announced, and then later his book. And I'm just so proud that she was able to help make that contribution to it. Again, thank you, and thank you to the university.
So we are actually going to transition to go upstairs to the second floor. I know that there's some stairs and there's also elevator access to go up there, and we'll have some small light bites of food at this time. But thank you so much for today and coming out.